So nobody has the credibility or the moral authority to accuse anybody else of sin, because we're all guilty. Whether you're a priest or a regular person, you don't have the moral standing on which to accuse others of sin. Let's back up and start that again. Chapter 4, verse 4. But let no man bring a charge, let no man accuse another. For your people are like those who bring charges against a priest. Presumably, in this case, the priest would be the holy man. Now, the priests were not holy here. We'll read about that in a moment. But it's like you're bringing a charge against someone who is holy and innocent, while you are very much not innocent. You stumble day and night, and the prophets stumble with you. So I will destroy your mother. That's the land of Israel. My people are destroyed from lack of knowledge. Because you have rejected knowledge, I have also rejected you as my priests. Because you have ignored the law of your God, I also will ignore your children. The more the priests increased, the more they sinned against me. They exchanged their glory for something disgraceful. For I will exchange my glory, or they exchanged my glory for something disgraceful. Now, I don't know if he's talking about the legitimate, genuine Levitical priesthood here or not. Remember, Jeroboam didn't let the priests do their job. Way back when they started this northern kingdom, and he started this experiment of meddling with the worship system, he got rid of the Levites. He didn't want the legitimate Jehovah priests around. He got rid of them. And he allowed anybody who wanted to be a priest, basically, to be a priest. So I'm not sure who the priests are that we're talking about here. If God is referring to the actual genuine priests who are supposed to be here and who are supposed to be teaching the people, or he's talking about the wannabe priests, the people who fashion themselves as priests in the Jeroboam system, I really don't know. At any rate, whichever case, or maybe both, I'm not sure, whatever case of caste of priests he's talking about, the problem begins with them because they're supposed to teach the people the true knowledge of God. I'm assuming that refers to the genuine priests of God. And like I said, they were expelled from the land a long time ago, so I don't know how many of them are still around. It may have been. It may have been. Hosea may have been one of them. You know, Hosea talks a lot about priests. So Amos didn't. Amos didn't talk about the priests. He focused mainly on the wealthy and the nobility of Israel. Amos was not a priest. He was a shepherd. And he focused mainly on the wealthy nobility of Israel. Hosea talks a lot about the priests, so maybe that means he was a priest. I don't know. I mean, he lived in the north, so if he was a priest, he couldn't do his priestly duties in the temple in the south, so I don't know. They, the priests, feed on the sins of my people and relish their wickedness. That sounds kind of metaphoric, and it may be. You know, it's like with every sin that people commit, the priests get stronger. But it can also refer literally. You know, the people were supposed to bring sin offerings that were eaten by the priests. You know, the priests ate. The substance of the priest's meal was from these offerings and other things that the Israelites would bring them. So if the Israelites are bringing the priests their food for these, false worship systems, maybe that's where it's referring to. And it will be like people, like priests. I will punish both of them for their ways and repay them for their deeds. So the priests are not excused. They're the problem. They're where the problem starts, because they didn't teach people correctly. The people aren't going to be excused either. They're going to be punished too. They will eat, but they will not have enough. They will engage in prostitution, but they will not increase. So not going to be fruitful despite having lots and lots of sex. Because they have deserted the Lord to give themselves to prostitution, to old wine and new, which take away the understanding of my people. They will eat, hang on, I read that wrong. They will eat, but they will not have enough. They will engage in prostitution, but they will not increase, because they have deserted the Lord to give themselves to prostitution, to old wine and new, which take away the understanding of my people. They consult a wooden idol and are answered by a stick of wood. What use is it to pray to a stick? To pray to a tree? That's what they do. A spirit of prostitution leads them astray. They are unfaithful to their God. They sacrifice in the mountaintops and burn offerings on the hills, under oak, poplar, and terebinth. I guess those are the green trees you read about. You know, when you read in the Kings and Chronicles about these high places being built in the hills and under every green tree, I guess those are the trees we're talking about, huh? Where the shade is pleasant. Therefore, your daughters turn to prostitution, and your daughters-in-law, the women you marry into your families, to adultery. Now again, as I said before, their understanding at this time, you know, unfaithfulness and adultery would have always been the fault of the woman. You know, they wouldn't have really even understood the idea of unfaithful. Now, the Torah law, did have a provision for stoning the husband, the man, who was caught with the adulterous woman. Okay? So the law did not ignore the responsibility of the male half of the adulterous partnership. But in general, in their culture, they didn't really care if the husband was unfaithful. That was not really a big deal. If the woman was unfaithful, there was a problem. Okay? We gotta do something about that. However, God is not He's not putting the blame on these promiscuous ladies. Whether they're members of your own family, your daughters, or the women you marry, you might want to punish them, but God's not going to, because He puts the blame on you. I will not punish your daughters when they turn to prostitution, nor your daughters-in-law when they commit adultery, because the men themselves consort with harlots and sacrifice as shrine prostitutes. People without understanding will come to her. So He's not going to put the blame on the women for doing this, like the men want to do. He's going to put the blame on the men. You do it too. I'm not letting you get away with this either. But you commit adultery, O Israel, let not Judah become guilty. Do not go to Gilgal. Do not go up to Beth Aven. Now, Beth Aven, okay, we read in our footnote, we're going to read about this term Beth Aven several times in the book of Hosea. If you look at your footnote down here, at least in my copy, it says Beth Aven means house of wickedness. Okay, this actually, when they say Beth Aven, which they're going to mention this term several times in the book of Hosea, they're referring to Bethel. Bethel means house of God, and that is the place where Jacob met God on his way out of the land when he was first fleeing from Esau, and he had the dream about the staircase and the entry, the connecting point between heaven and earth, with God at the top and him on the bottom. And then when he came back to the land after being with his father-in-law, his uncle's family, for 20 years, God had him come back to Bethel and meet him there again. And Bethel, in that same place, is where Jeroboam had set up one of his two calf sites. When Jeroboam took the kingdom of the north and set up a religious system to replace the one in the temple in the south, he set up a calf site in the north, in Dan, and in Bethel. So whenever we read the term Beth Aven in Hosea, it means house of wickedness, but it's being used to describe Bethel. And Bethel is also where Amos went and spoke, and we read about him and the confrontation he had with the priests there. So Beth Aven in this term, it means house of wickedness, and it's being used as a code word for Bethel. So do not go to Gilgal. Do not go to Beth Aven. So these were worship sites. These were worship centers. And do not swear, as surely as the Lord lives. So don't take the Lord the name of the Lord in vain. The Israelites are stubborn, like a stubborn heifer or stubborn cow. How then can the Lord pasture them like lambs in a meadow? They just want to keep going back to where they're going. Ephraim is joined to idols. Leave him alone. Even when their drinks are gone, they continue their prostitution. Their rulers dearly love shameful ways. A whirlwind or a tornado will sweep them away, and their sacrifices will bring them shame. Hear this, you priests. Pay attention, you Israelites. Listen, royal house. This judge, so priests, people, royalty. Everyone's guilty. Whether you're a regular person, a commoner, or a priest, whether legitimate or make-believe, or nobility, the royal house. Everyone has to listen to this. Everyone needs to stand up and pay attention. This judgment is against you. You have been a snare at Mizpah, a net spread out at Tabor. These are referring to physical locations in Israel. I don't know if I don't know if he is referring to specific incidents that occurred at these locations or not. But these are locations in Israel. If he is referring to specific incidents that happen at these locations, it may be one of those things where the people he's speaking to know what he's talking about, but the meaning is obscure to us today because we may not. We have to understand that does happen sometimes. These books are old, okay? Not everything was recorded. So sometimes when these prophets are talking, and I said before, when we read these prophets, we have to understand the context into which they're speaking. That is super duper important. We're not going to be able to just pick up one of these prophetic books and read it and get the meaning out of it without knowing the context into which the prophet is speaking. But there are going to be times when the prophet is referring to things that are not recorded in other books of the Bible that we may not really know what he's talking about. His people would have. The people who would have heard his message originally would have known what he's talking about, but we might be kind of lost. So we just have to accept that. There are going to be times when this may be one of those times. There are going to be times when that happens. The rebels are deep in slaughter. I will discipline all of them, whether priests, kings, or commoners. I know all about Ephraim. Israel is not hidden from me. Ephraim, you have now turned to prostitution. Israel is corrupt. Now, I said before, quite a while now, Ephraim has become the dominant tribe of the northern kingdom. In fact, I'm pretty sure Jeroboam, son of Nebat, the first king of Israel, the northern kingdom, was an Ephraimite. Let's see if we can get his lineage somewhere. Yeah, it's 1 Kings 11:26. This is in the last days of Solomon. Jeroboam, son of Nebat, rebelled against the king. He was one of Solomon's officials, an Ephraimite from Zereda, and his mother was a widow from Zeruiah. So he was an Ephraimite. The first king of the northern kingdom was an Ephraimite. And God gave him a promise that he would establish a lasting dynasty for him if he had been faithful to him. He didn't, of course. He wasn't faithful to him. But the enduring kingship of the northern kingdom could have been Ephraim's if Jeroboam had been faithful to God, which he was not. So Ephraim has been a dominant tribe of the north pretty much since the north broke away from the south. It's possible, though, that at this point in time, the situation in the north had broken down so much that there were even kind of separate kings going on. We read about some of the problems of the chronology when we read through the most recent historical books of 2 Kings 16 and 17. We talked about some of the problems of the chronology of this time and how some of the kingships appeared to have overlapped to a significant degree. Those last batch of kings in the north, which are killing each other and assassinating each other and fighting each other. It could be that there was even a period of time where there were multiple kings that were vying for authority. And so there may even have been a split in the north this time. So Ephraim and Israel may not be completely analogous at this point. It could be that you have one king ruling in one part of Israel and one king ruling in another part of Israel, and they're not completely united any longer. I really don't know. It's possible. At any rate, Ephraim has been the dominant tribe of the north. It is going to be highlighted here a lot in Hosea. And even a little bit, somewhat, almost made to seem like it's distinct from the rest of Israel. But I'm not really clear on that. Anyway, I know all about Ephraim. Israel is, Israel is not hidden from me. Ephraim, you have now turned to prostitution. Israel is corrupt. Their deeds do not permit them to return to their God. They are so far gone in their corruption and their rebellion, they can't even go back to God. It happens sometimes. We'll read about the New Testament, there are times when we saw it with Pharaoh, and Pharaoh in the Exodus made up his mind before the Exodus even started, the plagues even started. He didn't want to let the Israelites go, he didn't want to pay attention to their God. And it gets to the point where you can't do it any longer. We can get so rebellious. We can get so far gone in our rebellion and in our sin that we can't return to God. There are times that can't happen. It's a terrible state to be in. Terrible, terrible state to be in. But there are times when we just get so angry. Ahaz, the king of Judah, we read about that he's reigning sometime during this time of Hosea. He was like that. He just warred, and he went to war against God practically. He was so mad. He believed in God. He believed in the existence of God. He believed in all the gods. I mean, he believed in Aram's gods and Assyria's gods and Edom's gods, and he believed in every god. But he also believed in Israel's God, and he didn't like Israel's God. And he got so mad that he just pretty much went to war against Israel's God. You can do that. If we can get to the point where we just get so focused on proving ourselves right against God. We want to do what we want to do, and if God doesn't like it, that's just too bad. And we can win that fight. Like that is a fight that we can win, in the sense that we can go to our graves in this condition, never surrendering, never submitting, never acknowledging that we were wrong, never repenting. We can do that, but it's not going to be good for us in the end. Their deeds do not permit them to return to their God. The spirit of prostitution is in their heart. They do not acknowledge the Lord. Israel's arrogance testifies against them. The Israelites, even Ephraim, stumble in their sin. Again, a little bit of a distinction between Israel and Ephraim there. It's kind of interesting. Judah also stumbles with them. When they go with their flocks and their herds to seek the Lord, they will not find. So they're offering sacrifices, basically. They will not find him. He has withdrawn himself from them. They are unfaithful to the Lord. They give birth to illegitimate children, like Gomer did earlier. Now their new moon festivals will devour them and their fields. Sound the trumpet in Gibeah, the horn in Ramah. Raise the battle cry in Beth-aven, that's Bethel again. Lead on, O Benjamin. Ephraim will be laid waste on the day of reckoning. Proclaim among the tribes of Israel, I proclaim what is certain. Judah's leaders are like those who move boundary stones. Basically, they take other people's property. I will pour my wrath out on them like a flood of water. He may be referring here to the fight that Israel is having with Judah at some point during this time. We read in Kings and Chronicles and in Isaiah that there was a period of time in here where Israel and Judah were actively at war with each other. It was during the reign of Ahaz, who was a wicked king who was fighting against God, and he was not prospering because of that. That God ultimately does not allow Israel to defeat Ahaz. So he could be referring to that. That might be what Hosea is referring to here. He may be referring to some inter-tribal warfare between Israel and Judah that ends up with Israel losing ground to Judah. But I'm not entirely clear. I'll pour out my wrath on them like a flood of water. Ephraim is oppressed, trampled in judgment, intent on pursuing idols. I am like a moth to Ephraim. Moths, of course, eat away. They will eat away fabric and clothing, like rot to the people of Judah. So when you get too far gone in your sin, it's like moth eating away at your clothes, or rot eating away at your bones. When Ephraim saw his sickness, and Judah his sores, then Ephraim turned to Assyria, and sent to the great king for help. Ephraim has done that a couple of times now. Israel has. We read, King Menahem paid tribute to Assyria. In fact, that was actually a source of their problem. All of the inner warfare they were having, and the civil wars they were having with each other, where kings would come and go and assassinate. It was based on whether or not they wanted to pay tribute to Assyria. Some of them did, some of them didn't. Guys like Menahem thought it was more useful to pay tribute to Assyria so the king of Assyria wouldn't destroy them. And guys like Pekah didn't want to pay Assyria, wanted to fight them instead. And the last king comes along and he pays Assyria, but then he turns around and tries to make an alliance with Egypt, and he gets caught. So when he sees this problem, when Ephraim sees this problem, he doesn't turn to God. He turns to Assyria instead. and send to the great king for help, but he is not able to cure you. He is not able to heal your sores. For I, God, will be like a lion to Ephraim, like a great lion to Judah. I will tear them to pieces and go away. I will carry them off with no one to rescue them. Then I will go back to my place until they admit their guilt. And they will seek my face. In their misery they will earnestly seek me. Remember in Amos, Amos starts off his book comparing God to a lion. At the very beginning of Amos, in verse 2, the introduction to his message is that the Lord roars from Zion and thunders from Jerusalem. And all throughout the book of Amos, God is pictured as a lion who's ready to devour his prey. And here he has devoured his prey, and he's gone away back to wherever lions go after they devour their prey, and he's just going to wait there until they admit they were wrong and turn to him again. They will seek my face. In their misery, they will earnestly seek me. Come, let us return to. Now, this is one of those places, and this is one of those things. This is another one of those things that makes the prophets difficult. We didn't really have to deal with this in Amos or in Joel. We read the prophetic books we've read so far haven't really had this. Because Jonah was actually a narrative. Amos was mainly just Amos talking, and then there was a little bit of a conversation between him and the priest that came out to confront him. And then Joel was mainly just Joel talking. Joel was also very short. But here we have an example, and we're going to see this later in other prophetic books, where the speaker just kind of suddenly shifts. All of a sudden, we're talking, one person is talking and speaking about something, and all of a sudden there's a shift and somebody else is talking. And their writing style, they didn't have dialogue tags. Okay? Now, we do have quotation marks. In our English Bibles, you will see a quotation mark there. At the end of the sentence here that says, they will seek my face, in their misery they will earnestly seek me. There is a period and a quotation mark. In our English style of writing, that's a sign to us that that person, whoever that person is that's speaking, or God in this case, is done speaking. Okay? And then we have a break, and then there's a new section, and there's a chapter heading. Again, and then there's a quotation mark, and again, indicating that someone else is talking now. It's all right here, okay? Right there, in that section right there. But you have to remember, this is not native to the text. All this formatting, the periods, the quotation marks, the line breaks, the section headings, the chapter headings, the verses, that's all stuff that's been added to the text later on by editors and formatters and translators centuries later. None of that is native to the text. So here we have a break in speaker where the speaker suddenly shifts from one thing to another, one party to another party, and you just have to follow that. Come, let us. So now the people are talking to each other. So God has talked, or Hosea has talked, or God has talked through Hosea about their sin and their need for repentance. So now the people are going to be talking to each other about returning to the Lord. Come. Yeah, let's go ahead and start a new video.